Oh, very good. You have a shrine to your dead trees in your room. Nice.
It's not a shrine, more of a depository.
Oh.
So, I guess we should start with some follow-up.
Let's start with some follow-up.
And as I'm in charge of the emails, we've got 2 since the last podcast.
Oh, very good.
The first one is from Tom Cohen. And he's a listener, I guess, and a viewer of your videos. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that your videos and podcast have both helped me research and inspired me to pursue my hobby of game design and creation. He's working on a build to procedurally generate galaxies and solar systems and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear. You know, your product is going out there, man. Your product is going out there and making change in the world.
I know, right? That's really cool. That's proper amazing. Like every so often I get people write comments like that back at me and I'm like, what? This is mind-blowing. Like, it's crazy.
That is very cool.
We wish you, Tom Cohen, we wish you all the best with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But what he says in the email is, if you would like me to send you a dev build, please let me know. So if you want to have a go on it, he'll send you one on.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just if it's Mac compatible is the only issue.
Oh, of course.
Because I only run Macs.
If it's not Mac compatible, send it to me and I'll hog it and not tell Edgar anything.
So yeah, Tom, definitely send us something and one of us will be able to play it. That'd be awesome.
For sure. Keep it up, man. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of this.
That's a really good way to start the show. I'm really happy with that. It's really cool.
Cheers, Tom.
So anything else in the mailbag there, Bill?
Yeah, we've got one from Danny Delaluz.
Okay.
Who has a number of questions about rings. So like Saturn's rings, which I guess would be the iconic example, would it be possible for an Earth-like planet to have rings is the thrust of his question.
Oh, now this is interesting. There's 2 questions I get asked an awful lot. And they nearly always pertain to like moons and rings. People want to know lots about moons and lots about rings. So these are 2 topics that I need to badly make videos on. So I'm not going to say too much, Danny, if that's okay, because I want to research it fully and make a proper video on it. But a sort of TLDR would be that an Earth-like planet could have rings, but they'd probably be geologically unstable.
Okay, that's interesting because he mentions about moons here as well.
You see, it's always the moons and the rings. Always the moons and the rings.
His question is, if we did have rings due to debris left after the forming of the planet, would we even need a moon? My question there is, if you had moon and rings, would you have a situation where like the tidal forces of the moon would pull the rings out of orbit, like with Jupiter and the asteroid belt? You know, if you had something that was orbiting at half the speed of the moon, then would that be pulled away by the moon's gravity, and then you'd have like gaps in the rings?
Possibly.
In the orbital neighborhood.
Yeah, possibly. We have gaps like that in Saturn's rings. I'm not sure if they're made by resonances or by the actual moons just clearing out stuff from being in the rings.
Yeah.
I'd have to go look that up.
Resonances, that was the word I meant to ask, yeah.
I'd imagine it could be both resonances and clearing out. Say the question again to me. What's his question again?
Well, his question was, if we did have rings due to debris left after the forming of the planet, would we even need a moon?
You see, now, I think he's coming from the sense that do we need a moon to, like, stabilise the planet?
Right, okay.
And things like that. And then my gut reaction, but again, I would like to research this and make a proper video, is yes. Because I don't think the rings would supply enough, like, gravity to be able to bolster a planet.
And also, if they were a ring around the planet, then they'd share the same centre of gravity, so they wouldn't pull on the planet much.
How do you mean?
If it's a ring around the planet, then the average... Say it's a spherical planet, right? And it's a circular ring. Then the centre of gravity of the body that is just the rings would be the same place as the centre of gravity of the planet.
Assuming the rings are homogeneous.
Yeah, but I mean, they're going to be homogeneous. Like, they're going to be roughly circular. Like, you're not going to have, like, a 20-degree gap or something. Gaps are going to be... they're not going to be radial. They're going to be in zones equidistant from the centre.
And also, there's the problem as well that when we think of rings, we think of Saturn's rings, and we just assume, oh, an Earth-like planet could have those rings. Like, an Earth-like planet is going to have, like, a fraction of those things.
Yeah, of course.
If at all. So it's going to be really, really minuscule, and therefore won't have any great stabilising effect the way a moon does. In general, it's pretty much impossible to set up an Earth-like world without a moon. You really need a moon to keep things stable and like to lock the tilt, the axial tilt of the planet in. Otherwise, it wanders, and then you get like drastic season changes and like ice ages everywhere. So
Yeah.
rings or not, moons are really important. So yeah, Danny, there will be a full video. In fact, it's on I keep a list of like the next 5 or so videos I need to make.
Oh.
And
Trade secrets.
Trade secrets, yeah. And every time I complete a video, a new one gets added to the bottom of the list. Rings is in the top 5, so there will be a ring video within 5 videos, all going
Right.
well.
And you said the other thing people are asking about always is moons, which is very topical for right now.
It is, yes. Did you partake in some supermoon watching last night?
I did, yeah. It didn't seem much bigger than usual, but it was certainly cool looking. It was certainly cool and rusty and red.
I missed it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I was too
But you're
busy.
the spaciest of all the spaces.
I am the spaciest of all the spaces. Yeah, I unfortunately lost track of time. I was playing computer games. It was terrible. I started.
God damn it, Edgar.
I started gaming last night at like 10 or something, and then I was like, it'd be grand. I'll put in like an hour or two. 1:30, I think, was when the moon was meant to be at its brightest. So I was like, I'll go out then.
It was like 3:30.
Oh, was it half? Oh, sugar, because.
When it was meant to be at its most bloody rather than the brightest.
Oh, right. Oh, I read
think.
1:30. But anyhow, so I was like, in my head, I was like, go out for 1:30, Edgar. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'll just game away. And then next thing you know, it was 4. And I was like,
dear.
oh, okay, I should probably go to bed now. I got to get up in the morning and talk to Bill. So not only did I miss the blood moon or the supermoon, I also am wrecked. So I come to you lacking in space watching and in sleep.
Well, I'm kind of lacking in sleep as well, because I got a few hours either side of the moon watching. But it was still visible at 4, dude.
You see, I didn't even bother because I thought I was 3 hours too late. I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go to bed now.
Edgar.
It was awful. I'm so ashamed. Although NASA has their big announcement today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, their big mystery announcement. Ooh.
What's it going to be?
Well, I think the gossip around the internet is that they're going to announce that there's water on Mars,
Cool.
which would be very cool. I think a few
Like surface water.
like I would imagine that's it. Otherwise, there'd be no reason to merit all this like crazy build-up.
Yeah.
Because the build-up's been intense this time. There's a few very liberal people who are saying that they might have discovered life.
Nah.
Yeah, that's a long shot. Like it could well be possible. They might have found
I hope
microbes.
so.
I hope so too. Yeah, definitely.
I thought you didn't hope so.
Yeah, microbes, man, are as long as they don't come back, right? Don't bring the aliens back to Earth. They can stay over there. That's totally cool. No, but I think it's a long shot. I don't think we're going to find any. They're not going to announce life, essentially. So I imagine water.
On the topic of Mars, I just read The Martian by Andy Weir, I think is the guy.
This is the thing. It's going to be made into a movie.
Yeah, the movie's out very shortly, actually, starring Matt Damon.
Okay, right. Now, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, of course.
This is actually something I had considered putting in the show notes and discussing this episode. Mm-hmm. So we might actually just detour here from follow up for a little bit and go with this, right?
Sure.
First of all, what did you think of the book?
The prose was kind of nothing in particular. Like, it was good workman-like prose.
Okay.
He really likes to show his work. Like, it goes into a lot of detail of, the precise things he did. And, I needed, 300 litres of water for this much. And I needed, however many volts to do this thing. But I found that kind of endearing. I there's something kind of charming about someone like being just really eager to show off all the research they did. Overall, I enjoyed it, yeah.
Right, so this book has been the bane of my existence, right?
Good.
Because everyone, people who watch Artifexian and real life people who I interact with, have been like, oh, you should read this book. This is totally up your alley, right? And I am so incredibly against this book.
Why?
Because of the thing you said there about showing his work. I think that's death for any sort of fictional setting. And I think that's really, really poor world building to have to want to show all that.
It makes sense in the context of the narrative, because it's primarily told through this guy's personal logs, Like this guy who's been stranded on Mars, keeping a log of what he's been doing to stay alive.
No, I know the premise. Like, I haven't read the thing, but I understand the premise.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all. Like, find a different premise. Like, don't bombard the reader with, like, all your, like, numbers. Like, I would never, like, the world building we did last week, right? Mm-hmm. Where we talked about all the different numbers in our systems, you know? Like, you know, said orbit is at, 3.95 AU, and that's within, like, 1.4, and all this sort of stuff. I would never put that in a book, you know? I would never, even if it was a log entry sort of thing, I would never just, like, force that on the reader. Those sort of construction things are to be hidden from the reader. You should know them to make the world...
That's a hugely sweeping statement, man.
Yeah, but it's an accurate one.
It's not an accurate one at all. I really enjoy it. You're saying that it should be hidden from the reader. I don't think it should. I enjoyed it.
Right, okay, now, fine, right? But an awful lot of people, like, online are really alienated by it. They're like, I don't want to see, 50 numbers per page. I don't care.
Yeah, well, then it's an aesthetic preference rather than a blanket judgment.
I will agree that I'm generalizing, right? But I think that's a good generalization to make. I think one should hide their work in English. I think a poor writer would show all the work, you know?
I don't think it makes him a poor writer.
Okay, maybe not. I haven't read the book, again, so I can't judge his writing, but I think it makes him a poor world builder.
He's not really a world builder, though. He's just, like... No, he's not, like...
Well, no, Bill, he is. It's like a fictional setting on Mars. Like, everything he says is fiction. Like, it's equivalent to the technobabble in Star Trek. Like, someone has to make all
the technobabble in Star Trek, because it's like based on actual stuff. Like, it's more grounded in reality than Star Trek.
Yeah, but someone has to like make up all that stuff. You know, like someone has to, he has to come up with all that, like all those numbers. So it is kind of it's a more realistic version of the technobabble.
It's engineering. It's speculative engineering, but it's not world building in the same sense of creating a fictional setting. Like a fictional solar system or whatever.
Yeah, I know, but world building is kind of a sweeping term. It encompasses lots of things.
Yeah, I know, and we've established that in previous podcasts and everything, but...
I thought you would be very against The Martian. I really did.
Why?
I thought you'd read it and go, this is, like, terrible, with all these numbers, all this sort of, like, world building, like, stat building pushed in your face. I thought you'd be like, man, you gotta hide that stuff.
No, God, I'm very... opposite to that. There's loads of writers that I like that show their work. Well, I can think of like one really obvious example off the top of my head.
What's the really obvious example?
Neil Stephenson.
Books. Name them.
Snow Crash, which was like a kind of one of the first kind of post-cyberpunk books. Cryptonomicon, which is all about code breaking and data security. The Baroque Cycle, which is historical fiction that I mentioned before about the pirates and philosophers.
Okay, so what's his... How does he show his world building?
He goes on about things a lot. Like he will have a lengthy digression about Newton inventing calculus.
You see that sounds terrible to me. Like I don't like if there's no point to it. Like if it doesn't advance the story, like why do it?
Because it's aesthetically pleasing. Not everything needs to be about efficient storytelling, man. Have you ever watched The Godfather?
No.
You've never watched The Godfather?
I don't really like gangster films, to be fair.
Wow.
They do nothing for me. So yeah, like I've seen it in passing, and I know all the sort of like pop culture things, like The Horse's Head and all that. And I know what it's about, but
that's considered to be like one of the greatest films, and it's like completely antithetical to a lot of modern ideas about storytelling. That storytelling has to be, everything must advance the plot. There's loads of like sections in that film that are just stuff happening, and it's really nice. Like there's a bit where for ages Marlon Brando is playing with his grandson and does nothing to advance the plot. It's just a nice little vignette.
Okay, right, fine. But in like fantasy and sci-fi, sometimes these digressions come off as, let me show you all this amazing world I have built. And that's really not cool on behalf of the writer.
Sometimes.
I think a lot of the time might be the correct statement to make there, man.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is it's not a blanket truth. A good writer can easily get away with it, and when it's kind of when it folds in well to the premise of the book, I think it's great.
Okay, I take that point, but I still think it shouldn't be done. In my personal opinion, I think it shouldn't be done. If you want to do all that stuff, I think release like a lore thing, you know? Write the story of the Martian minus all the numbers, okay? And then release another book that is his logs with all the numbers.
But then that book itself would be like just numbers, and that would be crap. With no like framing narrative.
I totally disagree with you there. I want to read.
What goes on in your head?
No, like, I want to read the book, Bill. I want to read the book, and I want to be told the story and be, you know, that is my escapism, right? I don't want to sit there and have to try and think about the amount of, like, how many, like, metric liters of water he has, right?
What about in Breaking Bad, where he's describing his process and he talks about the science of making meth?
Okay.
There's especially in the first season, there's loads of stuff where he solves problems with like his chemical knowledge. Is that not the same thing?
No, because them talking about science in Breaking Bad is not like series defining. Okay? Like, anyone you talk to about The Martian, and you were like this as well when we started talking, they go, it's a good book. A lot of numbers, though. Like, no one who watches Breaking Bad goes, oh, it's a really good series. They talk way too much about science. Like, there's little, like, you know, interludes into it, definitely, and that's fine. But when it becomes the defining thing about the work, then there's a problem, I think.
Okay, you're talking about it being the defining thing, right?
Yeah,
well, that's reframed it slightly.
And so far, everyone I've talked to always makes the thing about there's a lot of numbers. You know, and some people are like you, they're like, oh, that's really cool. A lot of people are like, it's really hard to read because of all the numbers. But no one goes, oh yeah, there's hardly any numbers in that book. You know? So, but just back on the previous point you said, I would love to just read the book of the story of a man trying to survive on Mars, okay? Right?
Right.
And then have his logs published after the book as like an artifact from the world. I would love that. I would be totally on board with The Martian, but the way it's done at the moment, as far as I can tell, is that it's just a world builder showing off. And I don't like that premise. Now, I'll read the book, or I might get on an audiobook, but I remain very skeptical and very kind of, very hesitant to read this thing, but I will go through it.
Okay.
Anyhow, lengthy digression, eh? So where were we? We did the emails.
Yeah, we were going to talk next on the link on the schedule was the follow up from Reddit.
Oh,
What's been happening on the Reddit?
Okay, so there's lots to talk about here. Okay, point number 1 is that we need to give a shout out once again to our resident space cartographer Dominic.
Oh, good. Dominic, who came up with the plan for mapping galaxies. Yeah,
exactly. Hence the resident space cartographer. He is back again, and he has made a stars calculator based on my last video.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, which is really cool. It's a really fun little calculator. I'll throw a link in the show notes if people want to mess around with it. We had a bit of back and forth on the Reddit about, you know, how to improve it and things like that. Mm-hmm. And an interesting point came up that I want to talk about briefly. And that is the point about units. People don't seem to get these units things, and it probably is my fault. So I just want to take the time to like really clarify this. There's a lot of confusion about what I mean when I write numbers on the screen in Artifexian. See, I was always of the opinion that world builders always dealt in proportionality, right? Mm-hmm. So when we say, oh, I've created a planet that has a mass of 2, like that intrinsically applies it is 2 times the mass of Earth. Okay?
Yeah.
And if I say, oh, my star has a mass of 1.1, that intrinsically implies that it's 1.1 times the mass of the sun.
Yeah.
And even though in recent videos I've begun saying, you know, in solar masses or in solar luminosities, or, you know, in relation to the sun, people are still missing the point that every number I write on screen is not like a kilogram or a meter. It's always in relation to a structure that we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you with me?
Totally.
Yeah, you see now, this is obvious to me. But like, I keep getting comments and emails from people, and Dominic had a few issues in his calculator as well that we talked about that brought this up. I don't know what it is. I think maybe people don't deal with proportionality in school that much, and maybe they're not okay with dealing it outside of school, you know? Like, I think people's brains are hardwired to think in kilograms and, you know, meters, and not in
actual scalar units.
In actual scalar units, exactly. So I just want to say, like on the podcast, that every single number, unless otherwise stated in the videos or on this podcast, is always going to be in reference to an object that is like the object we are talking about.
Okay.
All right. So if we have a planet and it has a circumference of 2, that is twice the circumference of Earth.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad that makes sense, right? I just want to get it off my chest because there's a lot of problems with that. But I will say as well, my fourth video, the stars build video, didn't do anything to help it. I was not good with the units in that video at all, and I think that's sort of exacerbated the problem a bit. But yeah, just wanted to get it off my chest, all right?
Do you want to hear something about me forgetting about how to do maths, kind of?
Go for it.
When I was initially building the Handwavia system, there was some specific thing. I can't remember exactly what it was now because it's been a month or so, but I couldn't get the units to match up, and I ended up like with ridiculous. I was trying to work out densities. That was it. I was trying to work out planetary densities, and I had forgotten to directly check the part of the video that talks about densities, and I ended up having a planet where its density was like 1.4 times its own density.
What?
And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I was treating everything as proportional. I was treating the mass and the volume as proportional. But then when I was working out the density, I was including 4/3 pi r cubed. So I was re-adding a non-proportional element to it.
Yeah, so when you're working with these things, I know you know this, but just for the listener, is if you're working in proportionality, everything has to be proportional.
Yeah.
You know, like pi, 4/3, any constants at all are going to completely just skew everything. And I think there was a problem in the calculator with, was it density or something? I think it was density. And that sort of issue crept in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, no, checking your videos, it was like, oh, well, I do it that way. And I couldn't figure out why the way you did it made sense. And then I realized that I was mixing constants and proportions.
Rookie error, Bill.
Rookie error. But now I've made that rookie error and I've learned from it.
On another tangent, you want to hear an embarrassing math story on my part?
Do I?
I forgot how to do basic order of operations. And I was working on Khan Academy. I couldn't understand why I couldn't do these particular problems. And I was like, what is going on? And like, I ran the problems over and over again. I was like, these aren't even hard. Like, these are simple problems. And it turns out I totally forgot that one multiplies and divides at the same time in an equation.
Right.
So I was doing the problem, I went ahead and multiplied all the bits that needed to be multiplied and then divided and was like, why is my answer all skewed? And it's because you have to multiply and divide at the same time and work left to right.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh. I thought you did all the multiplication first and then did all the division.
No, that skews all your answers wrong. Yeah, what did you not learn the rule in school for the order of operations?
The way I remember the order of operations is that it's multiplication, then division, then addition, then subtraction.
Oh no, man, that's wrong.
Huh.
Yeah, it's parentheses, so everything in the brackets first.
Oh yeah, well yeah, of course.
Yeah, and then the exponents, and then multiplication and division happen at the same time.
All right.
They don't take priority over one another. Because the way I think about it is that like division is just multiplication, like an inverse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
so they're the same thing, so they happen at the same time, so one doesn't take priority over one another. And the same with addition, subtraction.
I can't see how... I'm having difficulty imagining how that makes a difference, to be honest. How...
Okay, we're going to do it. Do you have a pen and paper on you there, Bill?
Edgar, come on.
All right, here we go. Okay, ready? So,
of course I do.
All right, here we go. 6.
Yeah.
Divided by...
2.
Bracket.
Right.
1 plus 2.
1 plus 2.
Close bracket.
Close bracket.
Okay, work that out.
1.
Yeah, so the answer's 9.
Okay.
Alright?
So that means that you...
So what you do is you do the 1 plus 2, so you get 3.
Yeah, totally.
So then you have 6 divided by 2 times 3. And because multiplication and division happen at the same time, you just work left to right. So you do 6 divided by 2, and then you do 3 times 3.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So I forgot this and was just failing miserably at Khan. And then Khan Academy kept telling me, would you like to come back to this topic later? Is it too hard for you? I'm like, no, shut up, Can. I can do this. There's just something just isn't clicking, and I just totally like forgot order of operations.
That's kind of mind-bendy. I don't like it.
I might throw a link to the Miniphysics video on how the order of operations is wrong, and wrong in the sense of morally wrong.
Okay.
It's actually a really interesting video, and it kind of gets the nuts and bolts of why we have the order of operations. It's kind of cool. Anyhow, second long-winded digression. Oh God, right? Okay, let's tear through the rest of this follow-up. Okay.
Okay, so Dominic made a calculator.
Dominic made a calculator, which is awesome. It's great to see people taking my work and making it into real, tangible things. I am so happy.
Your content is going out there and making change in the world, man.
Yeah, man. All right. So, and speaking of making change in the world, another person used my videos to make something cool.
Oh.
And that person goes by the Twitter handle of @LokiWom. I think that's how you pronounce it.
The numeral one or?
The what?
The numeral one?
No, WOM.
Oh, W-A-M.
W-O-M.
W-O-M.
So @LokiWom made a guide for constructing solar systems inside Universe Sandbox based on my videos.
Oh, nice.
Which is really, really epic. And he opens up at the top, he prefaces it by saying, this is, not my work. This is the work of, in quotes, the world-building genius of Artifexian. I was like, oh yeah, I'll take that one. So big thanks to Dominic and Loki there. That's really cool. Like, makes me really happy.
That's excellent. So once Dominic and Loki release these things, listeners go and use them, and
I will
send the results to Dominic and to Loki and to us.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I'll link in the show notes all these things.
Brilliant.
As well,
Brilliant.
so you'll be able to get a hand of them. Okay, and then so finally, this isn't so much an item of follow-up, more that I just wanted to give another shout out to someone.
Okay.
Or two people in particular, and those people are called Paul Byrne and Lorcan Boland. And they are, at least one of them is an in real life mutual friend of ours.
Oh, Paul, cool, yeah.
Yeah, Paul, yeah. And they have a podcast, and because I love podcasts and I love when my friends start doing internet projects, I thought I'd give them a shout out to see if people would go have a listen to them. Their podcast is called Making Sense of My Immortal, and it is very fun. It is a very, very fun podcast. I think you should all go check it out.
Is this My Immortal the infamous Harry Potter fanfiction?
Every so often, Bill, the world is gifted with a work of pure genius. You have like Shakespeare's works, you have like Walt Whitman, and then you have that Harry Potter fanfiction. It's glorious, isn't it?
I could only get so far.
Do you want to know how many chapters I've read of it?
Yes.
I have read 31 chapters of it.
Oh dear, out of how many?
I think there's 40, 42, 43.
Wow.
It's a lot of chapters. But yeah, so basically the lads, Paul and Lorcan's podcast is about them reading My Immortal and basically reacting to it and having a discussion about it. And it's very fun. It's really cool. It's just two blokes, two friends sitting around and just having the chats about this hilarious bit of fan fiction. It's definitely worth a listen. All right, okay. So will we... Oh no, one more thing before we move on.
One more thing?
We had a comment in the Reddit by a person called Luna Eris, I think. Luna Eris.
Okay.
And it was quite a long comment, so I'm not going to read it out. But essentially the crux of it is that this person asks, have you ever... Like, we spend a lot of time building macro structures.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried to build microstructures like atoms and things like that? Okay. So rather than building a universe, building like the fabric of a universe. And this got me thinking, all right, and when Edgar thinks, stuff happens, right? So I'm, Luna Eris, I'm going to answer that, but in the main topic, because it comes into play there. All right?
Cool.
All right.
This is interesting.
Oh, well, hopefully it is. Shall we move to the main topic?
I think so.
Okay, so last time around, Bill, we world built two systems.
Sure did.
You built one system, I built one system.
Handwavia and Dagger?
And Dagger was my system, yeah. I have been thinking lots about Dagger, and I think I've come up with something really cool for my setting, and I wanted to run it by you.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so, and buckle in here. This is going to be a long one, all right? So, TLDR, I've changed a couple of things.
Good.
All right, so to recap, my system has 3 stars.
Yeah, it's a close binary and then a distant companion.
Exactly, right? And the 3 is going to play an important role in a bit, okay? So 3 stars. It has 3 special planets on the outer system that are in a weird resonance. Okay, and again, 3, it's going to play an important role later on. And it also has 3 planets, potentially 3 planets in the habitable zone. Again, 3, and the role will be played later on.
Oh, okay.
So what I am going to do, I'm going to change the premise slightly. I said that the gas giant in my habitable zone had an Earth-like moon. I'm going to change that. I'm going to make the Earth-like planet a Trojan planet.
Okay, yeah.
And make a moon of the gas giant be an artificially created Taurus planet.
Cool. Like in your video. You did a video about Taurus planets, didn't
Exactly, yeah. So using that video, I have decided to go build a artificially constructed Taurus planet. And the reason for the artificial construction is it takes away any sort of like, oh, well, this couldn't happen in real life. Yeah, it can't. But someone decided to build it. And again, I have a reason for that, which 3 plays an important role, and we'll come into it later on. Now, this artificially constructed Taurus moon, if you will, is in orbit around the gas giant for the purposes of mining helium.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to say that my gas giant has an abnormal amount of helium.
Helium mining. Gotcha.
Okay. All right. And again, the reason for these changes will all become apparent in a second. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So this entire thing started with making a galaxy in Photoshop.
Okay.
All right, so I was like, oh, it'd be really nice. I might Photoshop together a galaxy, and then me and Bill in the next episode can go, my system is here, and we could have a little map for our systems, and we could put it in the show notes and be really lovely. So I went and made a spiral galaxy, which should be the first picture.
Oh, I have to open these pictures now.
You have to open up these pictures, and I will throw these pictures in the show notes so you guys can follow along.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Okay, so that's the galaxy I made for us, all right?
Okay.
All right, and then after spending many, many hours making this galaxy, I realized none of us wanted a spiral galaxy. And I was like, oh, we both said that we'd really like to have an irregular galaxy. So I was like, okay, I got to scratch the spiral galaxy. And I just started looking into irregular galaxies, right?
Okay.
Now, there is a problem with irregular galaxies. And the problem is, fairly obviously, that they're quite chaotic, all right? So I went into Universe Sandbox, the great Universe Sandbox, links in the show notes, and I started smashing together spiral galaxies to produce irregular galaxies. Okay?
Yeah.
And seeing what sort of shapes came up and how could I map these shapes. All right?
Right.
Okay, so if you look at picture number 2...
Yeah, that's a big mess. I like it.
That's a big mess, okay? So, again, show notes, guys. All these pictures will be in there. So, I looked at that and went, that thing is impossible to map. And, like, the only thing I could come up with was, like, a topographical sort of thing, where you do, like, a top-down view, and then you have different colours for, like, the elevation above the galactic plane, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And below. But then, like, that got...
Can you meaningfully say that there's a galactic plane?
Yeah, exactly. See, I was about to say, there's loads of problems with that, and you'd have to make some stupid arbitrary distinction. So the only thing I could do was literally just take a snapshot from Universe Sandbox and say, there's the galaxy, and then, and it means nothing. So I was like, right, I need to define things better. So what I did next, Bill, right, was I decided to take snapshots of the galaxies while they're colliding at certain specific points in time. Okay. So what I did, I noticed that when the 2 black holes of the 2 galaxies, okay, when they first came close to one another, a really interesting shape formed every single time, regardless of how massive I made the galaxies. And those are picture number 3.
Cool.
Okay, so can you describe the pictures there for me? What sort of shape does that invoke to you?
Oh, hold on. I can't figure out exactly how these are numbered.
Okay,
4-1 looks a bit like a heart. 3-1 looks a bit like a rubber duck. They're kind of... It's like a fragment of a double helix, maybe?
Okay, right, you're getting close to what I was thinking, right? I immediately thought that they looked like knots.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I can see that.
Okay, and now just, you mentioned about the numbering thing, the 4-4, for example. Mm-hmm. That's the masses of the galaxies in question.
Oh, okay.
And the colours correspond to the colours of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Okay? So regardless of the mass I did, they all seem to come out with this sort of like helical? Is that right? Helical?
I think so.
Helexical?
Not helexical. It's spelled helical. I don't know how it's pronounced, though.
They all seem to come out with this like helical, knotted sort of structure. Okay?
Yeah.
So then, Bill, I went on the old interweb and had a look at knots, right? And in my sort of like ignorance, I thought knots were like shoelaces.
Okay.
And in many ways, knots are like shoelaces in the sort of everyday sort of sense. But it turns out there is a thing called a mathematical knot.
Right.
Okay, which is not like a shoelace. A mathematical knot is a closed structure.
Okay, yeah, I think I get you.
It can't be untied.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's loose ends, if you have a knotted thing with loose ends, it can in theory be untied and therefore is not a mathematical knot.
But if you fused the ends of your shoelaces together, you'd have a mathematical knot.
You will, yeah, exactly. So the simplest mathematical knot is like an elastic band.
Yeah,
It's like they call it the trivial knot or the unknot.
Yeah.
Okay, it can't be unknotted. And then you have like a periodic table of knots in a way. It's really fascinating. I'll throw links in the show notes for this, where you have they get listed in order of crossing.
Order of crossing means how many times they cross over each other.
How many times they cross over each other, and that's the minimum amount of times. Because depending on because they're 3D objects, depending on how you project them, you could get more crossings.
Right.
Okay, but you like every structure, every knot will have a minimal number of crossings, and that's how they're defined.
Yeah.
So I had a look around, and I realised that these galaxies I've been smashing together looked very much like a structure called a trefoil knot.
Yeah.
Okay, which is picture number 5.
Number 5. Yes, of course.
Okay, so now I thought I was on something. So now I have something that's a defined structure that people have, at least in passing, seen before.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe I could use this as my template for our irregular galaxy.
Okay.
All right, and just as a little thing, it's got 3 crossings, so the number 3 again.
Yeah.
All right, so then I decided to start making a regular galaxy on that template, and I produced number 6.
Cool.
Okay, now that's just like that's like the first steps. I haven't put all the finishing touches on it.
This is done in Photoshop, not Universe Sandbox.
This is done in Photoshop, yeah. Okay. Because in Universe Sandbox, they're not true knots. They're chaotic, you know?
Right.
But I needed some way of making it like not chaotic, but not spiral.
Right.
Okay, so question. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the structure?
When you say that you can't do it in Universe Sandbox, that makes me think, right, then how did it arise?
Okay, well, 1, you could hand wave it. And
okay.
2, you could always say that Universe Sandbox isn't a supercomputer and therefore can't replicate all the collision results of all different types of galaxies.
I guess you could.
You're more in favour of hand waving it, are you?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of classic bad science.
Oh no! Oh, I have to cut that bit from the podcast now. But I think the important thing with this is that I think that this picture implies a 3D element.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
It looks 3D, you know, whereas everything else would have just looked like a blob, a 2-dimensional blob of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, all right? And now, problems with this is that it looks really artificial, like you said, right?
Yeah.
So I decided to take the original trefoil knot, which, by the way, is also prime knot, and I'm fascinated by prime, so that was really good for me. And I decided to try and warp it a little bit in Photoshop to get a more of a naturalistic look. So that's picture 7 and 8.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, you see what I've done there?
Yeah.
So I tried to move it away a little bit from the sort of classic trefoil shape. Mm-hmm. So I thought 7 and 8, picture 7 and 8 there, Bill, look slightly more dynamic and a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, I like 8.
Yeah, I was just about to say, especially 8. So I think what I might do is I might take that as my template, number 8, and make a galaxy over that.
Yeah.
And then that might be my galaxy.
Now, the problem with this, though, is that how do two separate disks become one contiguous, like, tube, knotted tube? Like, would there not still be, like, the boundary zones, like, where the remnants of the two previous galaxies meet would probably be less well-defined and stuff? That's how it seems to me.
Yeah, no, I fully accept that this knotting sort of thing is slightly artificial.
Okay.
But again, I needed to have something that had a bit of order to it, because the proper chaotic, irregular thing is just, it's too difficult to deal with. And it's inherently meaningless. It's just the blobs all over the page. So I had to just find some way of putting some sort of order on it. And the more I kind of mess with it and warp it and like hide certain bits, or maybe not fully connect up certain like areas, I can hide away the trefoilness of it, but still have that as a template sort of thing. And then any eagle-eyed like viewers or readers of the book that I will never write might be like, oh, that looks very much like a trefoil knot. And then hopefully they'll begin to like go through and logic out all my decisions.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So what do we think? Did that sound like a cool idea to have a trefoil knot galaxy?
Yeah, it's a compelling idea.
Cool. Now, that's only the beginning, right? Because then the real void opened up. Turns out, right, a bit of a history lesson. Back in the day, we thought there was a thing called the ether.
Yeah.
Right, and so the ether, for anyone who's unaware, this was kind of like, people thought there was like this medium that permeated all of space, throughout which light propagates. And they call this the ether.
The way that like sound needs a medium to propagate through and heat needs a medium to propagate through, they thought that this was the medium that allowed light to travel. Exactly.
Which clearly isn't the case, just for the record. Like, that's been debunked. Like,
thoroughly debunked.
But that was a thing, and I knew this, but what I didn't know was that they thought atoms were knots, like knots in the mathematical sense, in the ether.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So like the hydrogen knot would just be like an elastic band somehow being formed in the ether. And then the next most complicated element, helium, which is going to be important if we remember earlier I said about helium. Helium is a trefoil knot, because a trefoil knot is the second most basic knot one can make in maths.
Okay.
So they thought helium was trefoil knot. So then I was thinking, oh, this is interesting. I've made a trefoil knot. And helium is a trefoil knot. So I was like, okay, so I have a trefoil knot galaxy. Let's say that my universe, or at least my local region in space, we'll say, if you want to be in the same galaxy as me, has an ether, that the ether that exists.
Okay.
Let's just use that as an assumption. All the physics work exact the same, just like they did back in the day. Like, you know, the world didn't not function just because they thought there was an ether. So there's an ether, and the trefoil knot shows up on the micro scale as the helium atom, and also on the macro scale as the shape of an irregular galaxy. Mm-hmm. Okay. How does this sound?
I don't think you can just say that there is an ether and that all physics works the same.
Why?
Because I can't remember the exact details of it. I can Google it in a second. There's something about like how the speed of light works disproves ether, and it's something that was like proven in the early 20th century. Something quite fundamental.
Oh no, I know, right. But say you're reading a book, and this happens to be the premise of the book. Would this be like I need to put down the book, this is stupid?
Potentially.
Now, that's interesting, because remember in previous podcasts, you talked about a story, is it called On? Was it On? A book called On, where gravity goes sideways.
Yeah.
Now, you clearly didn't put down that book. So what made you keep that book up? What would make you put down a book about there being an ether? And also, just another thing, I would, like, if I ever were to write this book, which again, I'm not, I would not actually state that there's an ether. This would just be involved in my thinking. Yeah,
of course. I don't know, it just feels like a very different situation, and it wasn't that important to the story, I guess, and it was only kind of clear at the end that was what happened.
Okay.
And it was an interesting enough premise otherwise. Okay, yeah, it's the Michelson-Morley experiment. I remember reading about it before and roughly getting it, and it's a little long-winded to go into now, but it's called the Michelson-Morley experiment.
I'll throw it in the show notes. I don't know it, but I'll read up on it. But what? So how about then if we ditch the idea of an ether, but we just say that in my universe we have the same atoms that we have here. Okay. Except that they are knotted. They are knotted structures of some subatomic particles that happen to function the same way as our particles. Ergo, everything is still our universe-like.
Could you say that, for whatever reason, at some point in the development of scientific knowledge in the culture you're presenting, that was how they were viewed? That was how atoms are viewed, the way that we have, like, the Bohr planetary model of atoms?
Right, yeah, I could do that, but I kind of want to try and world build the micro aspects of the universe. Now, there's problems with doing this, obviously, because anything that you do is not going to work. Like, you know, and you have to make some sort of conceit. And my conceit was that this was a theory that existed before, okay? So I'm not just pulling it out of thin air. And that it's a nice way of tying in the macro and micro, and it has no effect on my world. It's just a thing. And again, not even an explicitly stated thing. Maybe something that would be written in, you know, one sentence at the back of a lore book or whatever. Right. Not convinced, Bill, no?
Just, no, the idea of like, as far as I remember, the ether is just like, it really messes with a lot of things more than you might expect.
Yeah, but no, get rid of the ether then. Just the idea of knotted atoms. Knotted atoms. So, go on.
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
Possibly.
I like them because there's, you know, like you talk about the Bohr model of the atom.
Yeah.
In the Bohr model, you have, you know, we have solar systems. Yeah. And they, you know, look like little balls spinning around a central object. And then we had the same thing. We thought that was the same thing on the atomic level.
Yeah.
You'd have electrons going around a nucleus. And there's a kind of a cool, like, unity there. It's obviously false, but there was a cool unity. And I was trying to do the same thing here, where you'd have all the dust particles would go around the center of the galaxy in a knotted structure. Therefore, the subatomic elements would follow the same pattern.
Sure, and that's why I think it's interesting as a cultural kind of concept. Okay. Because, I mean, the Bohr model is not accurate.
No, it's not accurate, yeah. Actually, do you know what? The cultural thing, it could still work with the rest of what I got to say, so yeah, no, let me continue, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I am kind of playing devil's advocate here. I'm interested
totally.
in what you're saying.
So, I talked then, remember I said earlier about the Taurus planet?
Yeah.
Okay, now hopefully we understand why I said there's a lot of helium in the gas giant now. Yeah? Because the whole trefoil knot connection?
Yeah, you're tying the symbolism together.
I'm tying the symbolism, exactly, Bill. So the Taurus planet is a bit of a stickety-outy thing here. You're kind of like, well, what's symbolism with this? Turns out, right?
Well, that's a knot as well. It's the simplest knot.
It's an unknot, yes, right? Yeah. But also, it turns out if you were to be on the surface of a Taurus planet and walk around it in a prescribed way and come back to where you started, you will outline a trefoil knot.
That makes sense, yeah.
So the trefoil knot lies on a 3D torus. So we have, my idea anyways, was that you had the micro part of your world, like the atomic level, be knotted and the trefoil knot is prominent. You have the macro with galaxies also being knotted, and again trefoil knot, and then you have so the culture will be aware of these knotted structures, and then for them to go construct an artificial world, they would at least in my mind, they would try and do the most elegant thing possible, right? And for them, it might be this idea of constructing a torus planet because they know the mathematics of it, and they understand that the trefoil knot, or even just an unknot, the torus itself, is part of their universe, you know?
Yeah. And I'm sure you can inscribe other knots on the surface of toruses as well.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. But you can also just do a trefoil knot. It's one of those things, apparently, my research tells me, that is always just noted. It's always when you study topography, mathematical topography, and you go to 3D torus, within the first few sentences of any sort of analysis, it's always oh yeah, and the trefoil knot can be inscribed on a torus.
Yeah.
So it's quite an obvious one to people. So yeah, so that essentially is my thing. All right. Okay. So trefoil knot galaxy, trefoil knot atoms. Culture is aware of the knotted structure and emulates it in their megastructures. All right. And also the trefoil knot has 3 crossings. Okay. Which ties into my 3 stars, which ties into the 3 outer planets, which ties into the 3 habitable zone structures. You know, like, so I could make, if I ever write this story, I could make 3 be a very important concept in the story, just to tie everything together. Okay. And that, Bill, is what I've been doing for the past month.
Cool.
So overall thoughts, we're skeptical about the actual making the ether and the knots an actual thing. Is there anything else you're skeptical about or think I should revisit or look at?
Not necessarily that you should revisit this, but you're kind of you're pulling together lots of things from very different levels. Like the fact that there's 3 stars, it's kind of it's a bit like geocentrism. You know what I mean? It's like, oh well, you know, so obviously somewhere there's going to be 3 stars in a system somewhere in this galaxy. Why is that why is that meant to be important on a kind of a cosmic scale?
Oh right, yeah, no, it's not important. It wouldn't be important in the story at all. It's just further kind of tying things together for me. Like I could have 2, but like
that's like an aesthetic thing for you.
The idea of 3 is purely aesthetic.
Okay.
That is purely aesthetic, and like they wouldn't like my culture, for example, wouldn't necessarily maybe have the same sort of affinity to 3. But I just do in my world building, and I find sometimes, I don't know if other people or other world builders get this. I find if you have a number, it can kind of help with world building.
Really?
I think so, yeah. Like 3, for example. Like now that I have this number 3 in my head, I'm immediately thinking, oh, maybe their religion could have like 3 prime deities.
Some kind of holy trinity. To coin a phrase.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. I was thinking of Hinduism. But yeah, no, but like, even if my number was 4 then, I might think, oh, I might need 4 deities, you know? Like Martin and his, 7 deities?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if I was Martin and, you know, I might be like, oh, I have a number 7 in my head. And I might be like, oh, 7 kingdoms. And then, oh, 7 of this. And just a way of constraining things so you're not going, you know, I'll have 3 of that and 4 of that and 10 of this. You know what I mean?
I guess.
I don't know. I seem to have an affinity for this overarching unity that others just don't have.
It's interesting because that's very much world building, like aesthetic things, rather than what I would have thought would be your usual sort of hard science. It's a little bit of a surprising digression from what I expected.
Well, what do you think I would have done? Like if I said to you, Bill, I'm going to start doing galaxies. Where do you think I would have went? Do you think I would have just like built a standard galaxy and been like, this is all scientifically accurate? Place
Not
your world.
necessarily a standard one, but I would have expected you to, like, I mean, I'm not making a judgment decision here.
No.
It's merely reporting my expectations. I would have thought you would have been more close to demonstrable facts.
You see, I don't think I'm that far away from demonstrable facts. Like, can we say that there's not a knotted galaxy somewhere? Like, it's not an impossibility that like a chaotic system could, for a time anyways, end up as a knotted structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, there might be a unicorn. I guess you're using the exact same logic.
No. It is not beyond the realms of possibility to have a knotted galaxy. It is beyond the realms of possibility to have a unicorn.
Why? It's the same logic, man.
I don't think it's the same logic because I'm making fewer leaps here. Like the unicorn takes a good bit of leaps to try and say, well, this is legit. Well, like I'm going, irregular galaxies are inherently chaotic and their structures are not well defined. Okay, so there's no kind of.
But then you're making something that's incredibly well defined.
I'm basing it on something incredibly well defined. Remember I said earlier, I will probably mess with it so it's not so trefoil not looking. You know, but like have it come from there. Because if you're just building something chaotic, it's meaningless, isn't it? Like if you're
what do you mean by meaningless?
Like it's kind of pointless. Like if I just like drew a blob on a piece of paper for you and went, that's my irregular galaxy. It's kind of like, well, you just drew a blob, you know? At least in this, it's kind of like I have a thought process to try and like confine.
The blob wouldn't bother me at all.
Would it not bother you at all?
No, why would it?
Oh man, that really bothers me. Here's a good analogy. It's akin, right, to creating a world map and just randomly drawing like blobs of landmass without taking into account, say, how ocean currents would affect them, how tectonic plates would affect them, things like that.
Okay, but you say you built it like in you put two galaxies in the universe sandbox and smashed them together and got a blob.
Right. Yeah.
Then you're coming from something. There's a process there, and even if it ended up as just a blob, I mean, who cares?
Very, very true. But I also did put them into universe sandbox, smash them together, and they came out looking at least somewhat knotted.
Not-ish.
Not-ish. Yeah, not-ish. And so it's not like that much more of a leap to go, let's play with some knots. Oh, not convinced. This is really interesting. See, I was thinking, oh, you'd just be like, that's really cool, like.
No, like, look, it's cool and everything. I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying I'm surprised. It's a surprising step away from what I expected.
No, and this is good because this is why I like talking to you, right? Because sometimes I think I have got the world's greatest idea, right? And then I bring it to you, and then you're often very much times the voice of reason. And then, so then I can kind of like after the podcast now, well, after I finish work, I will probably sit down for a bit and reassess and see what I think. So it's good, and like I'm saying this to obviously have this sort of like a conversation with the listeners as well, but also to kind of like this helped my world building to chat with you about these things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's me. That's me in my knotted universe.
I guess it just feels like a kind of unnecessary justification for something that doesn't need justification. Like, a blob would be perfectly adequate for me.
Yeah, but there's no beauty in that. There's no artistic integrity in that. Like the way like human beings like metaphor and like layers.
I don't.
What? What is wrong with?
Like, I don't, like, a lot of the time I don't care. I mean, like, it just, metaphors and stuff often feel really unrealistic to me. It's like, well, this symbolizes, whatever. It's like, yeah, but real life doesn't work like that. Like, just stuff happens.
Oh, Bill, now I'm genuinely surprised you said that, though. But, like, isn't that the whole, like, why we enjoy reading books?
Sometimes, yeah, but not always.
Now, I'm going to make another broad statement here, which you're probably going to not like. But, like, is it not most of the time? No. Like, most of the time, do we not, like, we as in general people, do we not, like, revel in the symbolism and how well created something is in the different layers of meaning as opposed to just blob?
I can't speak for everyone, but only sometimes for me. I mean, sometimes I just like a story. There doesn't have to be any, like, deeper meaning to it. I just like a good plot.
Is the deeper meaning bad?
No.
Like in this case, are you saying that all this additional justification, this aesthetic justification, are you saying that this is detracting from what I'm trying to do? So just like, are you saying that like it's just better and clearer to just do your blob of an irregular galaxy and forget all the knots, forget the microstructures, that sort of thing?
No, I'm not saying it'd be better without it. It just feels a little unusual to me. I kind of don't get the need for it.
All right. This is getting a long conversation, right? But forget need. There is no need to do this. There's no need for us to talk about world building. There's no need for us to world build,
Yeah, all art is useless, I know.
No. But like, so it's not a need, it's a want. It's a want on my part.
Yeah, okay. And I guess what I mean then is I don't understand the motivation behind that. But bear in mind that, like, when you see about like loving metaphors and stuff, I don't tend to have emotional reactions to art or anything. So.
Oh, are you a Vulcan?
No, I'm not a Vulcan. I don't get emotionally invested in media that much.
Does this include all media?
Most,
including music.
Yeah, totally.
So okay. So you're a composer.
Yeah,
and you don't emotionally engage with music sometimes.
Most of the time, there's very little music that emotionally engages me.
Are you saying emotional as in like I'm brought to my knees in tears sort of thing?
No, I mean,
No.
it doesn't elicit any kind of emotional reaction. It's a kind of an aesthetic reaction for me most times. It's like,
But then you
that's
should
cool.
be all on board with this idea.
No, because you're comparing two entirely different media.
No, I am. Every so often, right, listeners, Bill is a very logical man.
I don't know about that.
No, you are a very logical man, and you're really good at portraying the logic behind your thinking and thoughts. Okay.
Okay.
And I've noticed this from living with you for a bit. And part of me really likes to just make really off the cuff statements that are really kind of like provocative in a sort of Bill sense, and watch Bill react. Oh, it's so much fun. I'm really sorry, man, but it's so much fun.
That's fine. It's fine. So, what you kind of brought up there at the start of your section was a comment from Luna Eris on Reddit about building like the kind of the more fundamental elements of the existence, like building atomic structures. Or that's a really interesting and really powerful idea. It sounds really hard.
Difficult to execute. That's why I could go no further than just going, my atoms are knots.
Yeah. Like, it's very easy to make, say, new elements, or, make up fictional chemicals and things, which is probably, there's so many examples of that.
Star Trek.
Yeah. There's very little we can really usefully say there. But I think talking about changing sort of fundamentals about how reality works brings us into either like real kind of deep sci-fi or actually into fantasy.
Oh, now that's an interesting thing. I didn't expect you to say that. Tell me more about this.
Okay, so remember, I think in one of the very first episodes, I mentioned an essay called The Skeptical Fantasist.
You did, yes.
By R. Scott Bakker. And that kind of touches on something that he says there, that, science fiction is about engaging with ideas about how we think the future might work.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, obviously you can find exceptions to that, but that's kind of one way of framing it.
Are you making a broad sweeping statement, Bill? Should I give out to you?
If you want.
No, never. I am being facetious. Go for it.
Bring it. Whereas fantasy, in his analysis, is about engaging with outmoded ideas about how the universe worked.
Yeah. Looking back in a way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that, changing ideas about how reality works and bringing it closer to older ideas is kind of like fantasy. That's do you see the connection I'm making there?
Yeah, it's very much like what I try to do.
Okay, but you're framing it as a science fiction story.
Am I? I don't think I've stated that, have I? Well, I suppose
maybe not, but
the construction of the Torres plant, yeah. But I see what you're doing.
But by talking about it like in terms of, explicitly this is how the atoms work and stuff, and expecting other things to remain similar. Whereas if you've got, just a thing happening on a planet, that could be a flat world. And that's not really relevant to affecting other things.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it raises some of the same issues. Totally, I'll admit that up front. It does totally raise a lot of the same issues. But it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if we talk about what are the elements, if we frame it in the mindset where the elements are earth, water, fire, wood, metal, then
the classical elements.
The classical elements are, something analogous to the classical elements. Then we get a very different epistemology about how that universe functions.
And I think, just to interrupt, I think if you are to start world building microstructures, I think the only real way of doing it, unless you're some sort of quasi-genius, is to take, like you said there, look back into the past and assume that what they thought was true is true. And deal with the ramifications of that. Like, what would happen if a world was composed of fire, water, air, metal, wood, or whatever?
Yeah.
Because if you just start arbitrarily, like, putting things everywhere and, like, redefining everything, like, like the electromagnetic weak force is suddenly X and not Y, then it's kind of like, well, that's meaningless, like, because we don't know what that does, you know what I mean?
We couldn't possibly compute how that would look in real life.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, there's certain things I think that you can't really get away with. Like, you can't say the world works on Aristotelian physics because they don't hold up to any kind of scrutiny whatsoever. Any kind of examination demonstrates that that's nonsense. So you're either going to have to not stray into certain areas or completely handwave them and accept that it's nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Accept that you're taking a huge literary conceit.
You mentioned at the start there, you meant about like just making up elements or compounds.
Yeah. Is
not all that meaningful.
I wouldn't say that's all that meaningful, but it's kind of... Maybe that was exactly what I said. I can't remember the words I used. But, okay, yeah.
Yeah, you said something to that effect, right?
Right.
I've been looking into it a little bit, like looking into like the likes of mithril and miasma and phlogiston and all that. I think if you are to like make up an element or take a made-up element that already kind of exists in the popular sort of zeitgeist, an interesting thing might be to see where that may fit in the periodic table. And like maybe it could replace something we know. Like maybe just, I don't know, like does mithril have certain properties of a certain like group of elements? And could that fit into those things? That might be a little bit more interesting than just going, and then there was mithril. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or take the properties of the various different groups in the periodic table and invent another element or substitute element around that shares properties. So you are inventing something new, but it's kind of still locked down into real world physics.
That would bother me.
Oh, I can't understand you.
Because
why
would
that bother you?
Because you're saying, I don't know, you're basically saying, so physics works the same for like 19/20ths, like 95% of it works the same, but then there's this whole group of elements where it works completely differently, and that's fine.
No, that's not what I said at all.
Well, no, like, okay, so if you say that, okay, well, lithium is now mithril.
Let's replace an element with another element. Give it all of the fundamental base properties, but then you can add and handwave, say, one extra thing. Like it's not silver. It turns out it's fluorescent pink.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a little closer to something I could live with.
But I think it's an interesting way of incorporating all the elements. One thing I don't like seeing, and I've seen some of this recently, is that you take the periodic table and then just in the middle somewhere cram in all the rest of the fantasy elements.
Yeah, like add a new group between the metals and the alkali metals or whatever.
Yeah, and it's just like, and there's all the phlogiston, miasma, and mithril, and unobtainium, and you're like, okay, right, no, but you're just putting stuff places,
Also, like, the idea of putting phlogiston on the periodic table is ridiculous anyway. It never seemed to be like that kind of matter to me. To the listeners who don't know, phlogiston is an outdated theory about how heat worked, that there was a substance that was the essence of heat and that permeated things, and when things got hotter it accumulated more phlogiston.
Man, humans are crazy, aren't we?
I mean, it's not
no, it's just really interesting looking
stupid.
back and being like, that's what they taught, that's class,
So yeah, like just like the idea of like it's not really what phlogiston does. It's not like I don't know, it's not like a substance in the same way in my mind.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. It's very hard to define what it does. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like, even if it was a thing that was real, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that would be on the periodic table.
Do you know what's another thing you can do with elements?
Or like the ether or whatever. Yeah?
Just on the subject of micro world building. The way we have all those heavy elements. Oh, and I think this is used in Mass Effect. Let me just go through this, right? We have all the super heavy elements that we create by bombarding elements with other elements.
Yeah.
And they only hang around. They only exist for like microseconds.
Yeah.
Or probably even smaller. I don't. I'm not a chemist. I don't know these things, but they don't hang around essentially, and we have to create them, and then they evaporate straight away. Apparently, there is like this thing called the Island of Stability.
Yeah.
Where when you get to some really high number of element, like element number, I don't know, 120 something, there is like this little area around there where the element may be stable. Mm-hmm. Now, stability, that might mean it might hang around for a second, as opposed to like, a fraction of a nanosecond. But I think, and is it Mass Effect that does this, where that element is created and is stable, and it has some sort of meaning in the story. I remember reading about that.
I can't remember. I haven't played Mass Effect.
I really think it's a video game, and something tells me it's Element. No, I think it's 119, but I could be totally wrong. I can't remember.
Could be. No, but the thing about other elements, I'd kind of feel a lot more accepting of them if they were not sort of shoehorned into something like the periodic table. If you came up with an alternative way of talking about them and of framing them.
Yeah, like knots.
What I'm thinking of is Mistborn.
Alright, okay.
You haven't read Mistborn, have you?
I haven't read Mistborn, but I know about it.
Okay, well, there's basically mild spoilers. I'm not saying too much, but a lot of the powers in Mistborn are based on various metals.
Right.
Some of these are fictional metals that don't actually exist, or at least it's not explained that they correspond to anything in the real world.
Okay.
But they are organized within a coherent, like a self-coherent scheme. Certain metals affect certain things, like some of them give you powers to do with your physical abilities, some of them affect your mind, some of them affect time, things like that. And there's consistent and logical relationships built between them on that basis. The ones that don't exist aren't said, oh, well, that's element 64 or whatever. They don't try and justify it according to some sort of real world scientific premise.
So they just have their own like periodic table, if you will.
Yeah, it's not really a periodic table, but there's like a scheme that puts them together according to their own logic of how they influence the world. And I much prefer that.
I think that's a really good idea. That sounds great. How many like metals are there in Mistborn? Like, is this an expansive catalogue of how stuff works and interacts together?
I can't remember exactly. And it's
like less than the periodic table?
Oh, yeah. A good deal fewer. But
a good deal fewer, okay.
To give a precise answer to that might kind of spoil some of it.
Okay, cool, that's fine.
And he's not finished with that setting, so it may turn out that there's more as he writes more. He might expand what exists within the setting, and he does that within the context of the original trilogy as well. Like at the start, you've got this idea about how the schema works, and by the end of the book or by the end of the trilogy, you've got a different, slightly different in scope and expanded in scope. Is
Mistborn just to have this? Mistborn is the thing that's set over like different time periods.
Ultimately, that's his intention. Yeah. So right now, there's a sort of broadly speaking, a fantasy story. Then there's a sort of a Wild Westy kind of steampunk sequel to it, which is going to have a few novels. There's meant to be a modern day one, and ultimately going to be a kind of a science fiction-y kind of thing.
I'd love to see what he does in a sci-fi sense with that.
Definitely. Yeah.
Do you know what just popped in my head as well?
No.
And I realise that we've been talking a long time on this point, but also the idea of just making a new table of stuff, of elements, it kind of seems, now that I think about it, kind of seems illogical as well, because all you can do is really just go on what we already have. Unless you want to incorporate magic, and then it's a whole different thing. But like, if you go, all right, I'm going to need some bits of my universe to be non-reactive, and then you go, well, I have 4 distinct, non-divisible things of them, and they're just essentially noble gases,
Yeah, you're rebuilding the same stuff under a different name.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just, while you're talking there, I was trying to think, how could you go about doing it that it's not just a rebuilding of the same thing. It's difficult. It's really hard. This is why we don't find very much like fundamental world building, if you will, in fiction, because it's just mind-boggling. Like, you need to be like a nuclear physicist to understand this.
Or you just take it in a completely different direction, like you go to kind of a fantasy kind of route, and that allows you to handwave a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I mean, the main example I can think of like really doing this is Flatland. Have you ever heard of Flatland?
No.
It's I've only read extracts of it from when I was a kid, but it's a reasonably famous story, told from the point of view of a square citizen of a 2-dimensional universe.
Oh, that sounds epic.
So it's 2-dimensional, and then he sets up the society that exists among the shapes that live there, and how things work in that universe.
Oh, right. Interesting concept. Well executed.
It actually, from what I remember, there is one thing that he describes near the start that actually completely undermines the whole thing. But, he says like you can tell what shape is coming towards you because of the like squares are very like full on, and then their sides just like stop, and then polygons, with more sides, then their sides kind of gradually fade away. But in order to see that, presumably, like they would have to have some degree of thickness, which means that they would be 3-dimensional rather than
and there'd be no distinction between a square and a circle. Oh no, you'd have the slight fading. That sounds problematic to me.
But otherwise, I thought it was very well thought out.
Now, that's the thing as well, right? As bad as world building fundamental particles is, world building dimensions is also quite difficult. Two is okay. 2 we can deal with. Like trying to write something in 4D space, that just I couldn't even. I'd love to do it, but I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, like trying to imagine. Like I always think about this, right? You know the way on the X, Y, and Z axis that we have.
Yep.
Every axis is perpendicular to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the concept of having a W axis that is perpendicular to the rest of them. You're just like, what? Brain broken, gone.
I can imagine certain things.
I can honestly say I can't imagine anything about 4D space.
Okay. Think about this, right? Think about a 2D plane.
Yeah.
Okay, and think of a 3-dimensional sphere passing through that.
Okay.
Okay. So how does that look from a 2D point of view? You've got nothing, then you've got a point which expands at a certain rate into, like, which becomes a circle, which expands at a certain rate to its largest size, and then contracts to a point again at the same rate in reverse, and then it's gone.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I think I'm with you there.
So by analogy, for a 4-dimensional...
Oh, Jesus, okay.
Bear with me. For a 4-dimensional hypersphere to pass through a 3-dimensional space would be, you have nothing, then you have a point, which becomes a sphere, which expands into a larger sphere and then contracts again.
Yeah, no, brain broken, man.
Really?
Yeah, no, I can't. I don't possess the ability to think in 4 dimensions.
But can you get the 2-dimensional one out? Like the sphere passing through
barely.
I mean, if you like literally just think about like a sheet of paper, right?
Yeah.
And like imagine like a sphere, like a ball falling through it. A circle, a sphere getting bigger and then getting smaller again.
I'm on a 2D plane.
Yeah, imagine you're a 2-dimensional plane.
Okay, and I look up, right? Okay,
yeah.
And above me is a 3D space.
No, you're not looking into 3-dimensional space. You're not looking into 3-dimensional space.
Okay, so we have... Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. So you're looking along the plane, along the 2D plane.
You're at the bottom of a page and you're looking towards the top of a page.
Bottom page, you're looking... Yeah. And then the sphere is coming towards the plane. And then... Oh, yeah. There's a dot in the middle of the page. Yeah. And then as the sphere moves through, it becomes a little bit of a line. No, it does.
It doesn't become a line. It becomes a circle.
But how do you tell it's a circle?
Oh yeah, I mean, like from your point of view, you can't tell that it's a circle. That's not relevant though.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. Oh yeah,
it is a circle.
It is a circle.
It is inscribed. It's intersecting like a circle onto the face.
If you're looking at it, see, I was trying to get my head around it as me being in the plane. Like I get that if I'm standing outside the plane, that a 3D sphere passing through a plane is just a circle. Like I get that. Yeah.
But like it's making a circle on the page. But like the same way we have like we just see a circle, but we're able to tell that it's a sphere. Like when we look at a ball, we can't see exactly all around it. It's a circular shape, but we know that it's a ball. I mean, I guess we've got binocular vision or whatever, but still.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't extrapolate that to 4 dimensions.
No, you don't have to. You just have to think of it in 3 dimensions. A ball, a 4-dimensional shape falling through a 3-dimensional plane would be like a ball getting bigger and then getting smaller and then disappearing.
If you say so, man.
It's just the same thing, just one extra dimension.
like my head is going, okay, in my head, I have a picture of this 2D plane.
Yeah.
And the sphere, and passing through it, okay?
Yeah.
And now I am trying in my brain to extrapolate that to a 3D space with a 4D thing coming through it, right? And
all I do is imagine what I would perceive, which would just be a ball getting bigger and smaller.
Yeah, but okay, fair enough, but that's kind of, it's a tiny bit meaningless, like I've seen balls get bigger and smaller. Like, you know, if someone kicks a ball at you, they get bigger and smaller, but that doesn't mean I have some sort of insight into 4D space. Like that, it's not something that I can like step outside of and be able to rationalize.
No, but that's a beginning step to making sense of it. In my mind.
Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make way back, like 15 minutes ago, is that we will never be able to do that. Like it's where our brains aren't geared towards that.
I'm sure some mathematicians can.
I don't know. I'd like to hear from a mathematician if they actually think properly in 4D and not think in 4D in terms of the equations they use to work in 4D. Because I can think in four-dimensional space if I use equations that function in four-dimensional space.
Yeah, if you four variables in algebra, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're suddenly in 4D space. That's easy. But to like step outside of it and conceptualize it, I don't think people can do it. Like, I don't think you can get like the idea of like the Tesseract. You know the Tesseract?
Yeah.
If you watch animations of that, there's like this, when you spin it around, there's like this folding in and out of itself. Like that, I just can't comprehend how a solid object could do that because we don't live in 4D space and I will never be able to do that, which is a great shame.
I mean, yeah, it's hard. I don't think it's entirely impossible though. I'm sure it's there's some way to visualize it.
Interesting point though on this, and we really have to move on after this, is that only in 3D space can one have a solar system formed from a molecular cloud.
Okay.
Which I when I found that, I thought that was really cool. Like no other n dimensions can you have something that goes from a 3D sphere, like the molecular cloud, to a 2D plane. That can't happen in other dimensions. So like in a 4D space, if you get a 4D cloud, it will always remain at least 3-dimensional. It will never flatten down to 2 dimensions.
Oh yeah, it might always go down to 1 dimension less.
Yeah, I don't know if the rule is n-1, but something like that. Yeah, which I thought was great. So like,
well, yeah, I can accept that.
Well, yeah, it's fact. Like, so I mean, like, you have to accept it. But I always thought that was really cool. Like that our little happenstance here is so uniquely sort of defined in such a way that gives rise to us. I think it's really cool.
I don't.
Yeah, go on, tell me about it.
No, it's just the anthropic principle. It's like a puddle saying, "Isn't it convenient that this hole I'm in is the exact same shape as me?" Yeah.
No,
I mean, we're only going to be in an existence that allows us to exist.
I know. Yeah, that's exactly right. I still think it's cool that that is what allows us to exist. Those are the parameters. I think that's really cool. A lot of disagreeing with each other today.
It doesn't move me, I'm afraid.
No, sorry, we are going to have to lock this down fairly quick, right?
Yeah.
But I want to say one last thing. It just popped into my head as well about the world-building atomic structures. There's an interesting idea. I don't understand it at all, okay? But there's an interesting idea on the Atomic Rockets website, or at least they link to it. I'll put it in the show notes, about a setting that is all built around Sierpinski's triangle.
Oh, you linked me to this and I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, do you know what this triangle is?
Yeah, it's the Fractal Triangle thing. It's
the Fractal Triangle. Anyone who knows Vi Hart's videos will know that she has a great affinity for this triangle. Again, show notes, I'll put links in it. And it's like, yeah, it's a periodic table based around Sierpinski's triangle, and the whole way the universe works is, I think, like, worlds are embedded on planes within Sierpinski's triangle. It's just, it's like mind-boggling.
Cool. I'll have to look that up. Can you put that in the show notes?
I will put that in the show notes. I think that's something that people should read if you're in any way interested in all this. I'm not even going to attempt to try and justify the decisions the creator of this has made, because this is way over my head. But I think, like, it's kind of cool because he or she takes this structure that we know and plays with it in this sense. Kind of like your favourite world builder over here took the idea of a knot and imposed it on my setting to bring an overall aesthetic unification. Some would say brilliant. Others might say useless. I'll leave it up to you.
I don't think anyone has
decide.
said useless, Edgar. No one said useless.
Anyhow, will we shut it down there?
I think we'll call it there, shall we?
Okay, now I have to go to work in like half an hour.
Okay.
So I feel like the green room is probably not going to happen this month.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll give you some more time to furnish it up a bit more, make it real special.
Exactly. There should be significant improvements when we come here next month.
Brilliant.
So anyhow, I will see you soon, Bill.
Absolutely.
And listeners, get involved in discussions. Let me know what you think about my idea, and feel free to shoot it down. Any sort of criticism is good criticism. All right, Bill, I will talk to you very soon, all right?
Catch you soon, man.
All right, all the best, man. Edgar out.
Edgar out. Edgar, okay, I'm saying this off the record.
Okay, so is this something I have to cut from the podcast?
This is something you have to cut from the podcast.
Okay, go for it.